You might be happy to know that this week's lecture is going to be a short one since it only deals with one chapter out of the Seccombe text. We're going to be setting the day textbook down for a few weeks while we do a little bit of catching up in Karen Seccombe's perspective of the lives of welfare recipients in this modern day and age. In this particular chapter, Seccombe does a very good job of kind of looking at the myths that surround welfare recipients and also explaining some of the origins of those, as well as how the recipients deal with the stigma that is associated with those myths. For one thing, she says that the recipients are very aware of the fact that there are societal attitudes of negative nature about welfare recipients, and she says that these negative attitudes arise from things such as, a number of assumptions that whites have of a rather racist nature regarding welfare and who is on welfare rolls. For instance, that the assumption that the majority of the poor and the majority of welfare recipients are black. And in the earlier chapters, you see that there's that is not upheld by the statistics in terms of who receives public assistance. Many whites think that the blacks' experience has improved, and it has in some respects for a certain portion of the African American population, but not nearly for all of the population. And so, because of that, they believe, or they don't believe rather, that they're discriminated against, that blacks are discriminated against, and so therefore, again, that there's really no need, no explanation for the fact that there's a larger percentage of African Americans who receive public assistance benefits than of Caucasians. So there's a resentment towards minorities receiving benefits, and particularly in this case, we're talking about African Americans, and there's opposition to affirmative action programs because there's just no recognition or understanding of the fact that racism continues on both an individual and institutional level in the United States today, continuing to hold minority applicants back from equal access to the institutions and opportunities in this society. So when you look at this slide, really, you can sort of read it from top to bottom and see, really from the very top to the very bottom, that each one leads to the next. And some of the realities, for instance, when you look at things statistically speaking, some of the things that the white majority in our nation look on and point to in terms of, blaming African Americans and the poor people, the blacks who are living below the poverty line, blaming them for their own situation is they look at what are considered to be largely family patterns that diverge from the typical American values of the two-parent family with hard work and all those types of things, and some of these criticisms arise from statistical realities that say, for instance, that blacks are less likely to marry than whites, and blacks are more likely to have a child outside of marriage. Now, Seccombe points to the fact that statistically these may be accurate statements, but she also offers some explanations in terms of how it is that comes about, and this is something that is worth reading and being aware of. For instance, she says that in the African American community, there are very high rates of unemployment, and that these high rates of unemployment and underemployment discourage young adults from marriage. Black males do not believe that they have the financial stability to be able to support a family and take on the traditional role that the larger American society would expect of him as a father and a husband in a home, and so they tend to oftentimes decline or avoid marriage because of that they realize that financially speaking, they're not in a position to live up to the expectations of society. And likewise, African American mothers sometimes will also not find a lot of promising candidates, I guess, for marriage out there, and this is what she talks about: the critical shortage of marriageable men. She indicates that about the alarming rate of violent deaths of African American men. The fact, again, that our society has a tendency to incarcerate a higher percentage of African American males than I believe any other population in the United States, and so the the fact is that there aren't a lot of marriageable men out there, she says, and that's another thing that discourages African American females from getting married as well. That even if the African American males and African American women were employed, their earnings are significantly less than the norm in society on average. So she offers these not as any kind of condemnation, obviously, of the population, but rather as a way of explaining the fact that, well, yeah, there are some patterns in the African American family, and this is just one or a couple of explanations for it. Really, there are others that involve larger sociological factors and historical issues, but the dynamics do exist that are different from, let's say, the mainstream norm in America, but that there are reasons for that are grounded in economics. There are a number of different contexts in which public assistance recipients of any race will experience stigma and discrimination, and she talks about some of them in this chapter, including more, perhaps the worst is the grocery line, where she talks about people standing in line behind individuals who have food stamps, commenting on what's in their basket, and complaining and about them buying steaks. That's sort of the image, I guess, of the food stamp recipient is that they use government money to live high off the hog, and as Seccombe points out, of course, even if she were buying steaks occasionally for her family, the fact is that she's giving up a lot of other things in order to do that. So there's a lot of stigma associated with this. Even stigma in the public assistance offices, where oftentimes the workers are very judgmental. Public health clinics, where they feel sometimes as though they're made to wait longer than average, and also that they are patronized oftentimes by nurses in those settings. Seccombe points out that even when applying for work, sometimes the fact that one has been on public assistance and receiving benefits for a period of time can count against you in getting hired for a job, because there are assumptions about recipients that carry over, and individuals may think that this person's lazy and I'm going to hire this person who has a better work history. And certainly perhaps the most harmful or the disapproval from family and friends that come with it for individuals who are on public assistance. And so there's different things that individuals have to do. And in any study of diversity issues and discrimination, you're going to talk about stress management or stigma management, I guess, is the term that Irving Goffman used in describing how individuals deal with their image in society. And Seccombe talks about 4 different ways of managing stigma. The first one that some recipients would do is say, well, I don't really see that people look down on me, and just basically deny that reality. And she says, the interesting thing is oftentimes that statement's followed up with, and I don't listen to it anyhow, which really does tell you that indeed they're experiencing that, they do experience and recognize the stigma. But in order to do this, individuals have to avoid people and places where they might encounter the stigma, so it really limits their life in many respects. Another way of managing the stigma involves distancing themselves psychologically from other welfare recipients. And so while the recipient may be receiving benefits herself, she talks about herself as being very different, her circumstances different from that of other recipients who fit the stigma, but she does not. Sometimes blaming external forces, the lack of jobs paying a living wage, for instance, the fact that if she did get to work, she couldn't find a daycare that she could afford to pay for her kids, lack of father support, needing to stay home because of the crime rate in the neighborhood, those kinds of things. Now, these are all things that are realities for them, and so I'm not necessarily suggesting here that this is, not an accurate statement in terms of why somebody would be on public assistance. But again, this is the way in their minds, they have to perhaps for stigma management associate, develop reasons why it is that they need to receive benefits. So And finally, the importance of motherhood, that it's important to be a good mother, and as much as they might want to work, that they believe that staying home with the kids is the most important thing of all. Now, before I move on to that, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second, I just wanted to mention that one of the factors about stigma management we often run into, and when we're working with clients of the system, another thing that happens is that individuals incorporate those stigmas. They internalize them and make that a part of themselves. And so sometimes you're going to run into recipients who really believe those things about themselves, and it's whatever those negative kinds of things might be. And so that's something that to be aware of, and to when working with our clients, to be sure that we don't reinforce that negative self-image through the kinds of things that we do and say to them. So the question about the virtues of motherhood, and that really is one of the big issues, I suppose, for public assistance recipients and women in general today, which is, the conflict between the desire to be a full-time caregiver, and really there's an expectation of society, more so than of the father, that the mother provide the structure and nurturance and consistency that the children need in the home. So you have that demand placed on the woman to raise her children properly, and the other one is the expectation, which is I think more the norm these days, of sort of the supermom thing, where the mother not only raises her children, does a good job with that, but also juggles perhaps a job or some sort of activity, to improve herself, education or something like that, so that she can do both somehow, and that it's not that big of a strain on her. It's almost an expectation of women, young mothers these days. And as this slide points out, and Seccombe mentions, that compared to other industrialized nations in the West, the United States has a very weak family support policy. And again, I think I may have mentioned to you earlier, but Michael Moore's movie, Sicko, he interviews individuals in different countries, and Americans in some spots, I think, living in France, for instance. And it's interesting to see the kind of benefits that young mothers get in France, young working mothers, or ones that don't work. They don't have to work, in fact, once they have children, because of the way the government steps in to help them. It's really pretty amazing to realize how far behind we are in this, and this all ties back into that idea of individualism and taking care of yourself as sort of this value and virtue in America. The current thought is that you can be a good mother and be employed, but as Seccombe points out very eloquently, I think it's much more difficult when you are impoverished and you're a single parent. You can't buy the amenities that the more affluent families use to cope with the dual demands of parenting and working at the same time. She says, when you have no money for takeout, fast food on the nights you're too tired to cook, when you must lug your clothes to the laundromat twice a week because you can't afford your own washer and dryer, when you have to lock young children home alone sometimes because you can't afford a babysitter or round up someone to watch them for free, and when you and your children must rely upon the bus for transportation because you can't afford a reliable car and it takes 2 transfers to get where you're going, the glamour of both a career and motherhood begin to vanish. And that is the dilemma for poor people. It is a different thing. When you live in at this type of economic level, and in the neighborhoods where welfare recipients often live, it's much more difficult to juggle all these demands than it is for the middle class supermom, so to speak. So these are realities that we don't often. Well, we don't realize, we don't stop and think about, but these are the realities of the day-to-day living, and this is the kind of thing that I think this book does such a good job of pointing out for us. There are some other books. I think I've mentioned some of these to you in another lecture, but I'm going to mention them again. Other books on poverty. Nickel and Dimed is one of the more famous books by Barbara Ehrenreich. It was first published about 10 or 11 years ago, and this is a woman who's a sociologist. Who she's not a sociologist, she's a writer. But in any event, she experimented with living on a minimum wage and left her home and got an apartment and just took a job as a waitress and working at Walmart and things like that to see if she can make ends meet, and found out that in some cases she had to have 3 jobs in order to make ends meet, or some of her coworkers at least were doing that. And it's a very interesting book, and well worth the read. That is available, I know, as is. Well, all of these are available on Amazon, but the next one, The Working Poor Invisible in America, and Nickel and Dime are both available. They're very inexpensive paperbacks on Amazon. They're also available as Kindle downloads if you have an electronic reader or something like that, and pretty cheap there. The Working Poor Invisible in America, actually was recommended by one of your classmates, and it's a book that I do have on my shelf, but I haven't read yet. But I've heard very good things about that, and in fact, I think the UAA identified it as the book of the year a couple of years back, as I recall. So this is something that I think is worth reading. Also, again, another writing on what it's like to be working and living in poverty in America. The fact that you have a job doesn't assure anything. And finally, Karen Seccombe also has a book out that's similar to the one you're reading here. It's called Families in Poverty from 2007, which focuses more on the poverty issue. And certainly some of what you're reading in here kind of crosses over into that, but kind of a broader look at families who live in poverty and not just those on public assistance. So if you're interested in this and would like to do some more reading on it, those are some books I'd recommend to you. Fairly light reading overall. In tying this up, just some questions for you to think about as this lecture ends is, first of all, have you ever experienced stigma of some sort? It might not be about being a public welfare recipient, but it could be about any number of things. And most of us have at one point or another experienced some sort of stigma. And if you can kind of get back in touch with that and remember what it was like, the kinds of feelings that you had about that, and how you dealt with it. How did you manage the stigma? Is it something that continued on, or was it about a temporary lot in life, or was it something about quality that you'd never be able to get away from, or that was a long-term quality? These are some things for you to kind of think about if you want to get a more personal touch with what Seccombe is writing about in this chapter. And wondering how your experience might have been similar or different from the people that are on welfare. So just some things to consider and contemplate a little bit. Since you have such a short lecture, perhaps you take a few minutes and do that. On March the 1st, I think that's a Thursday, your test will open. That's the midterm test, or test 1. And it is a multiple choice test. It's 40 questions. They are randomized, and for those of you that had other online courses with me, you're familiar with this, but for those of you who have not, you will have an opportunity to retake the test if you're unhappy with the results. But once you open a test, the test is timed. You have 1 hour to complete the 40 question multiple choice test. Obviously, you can have your book in front of you, and so and your notes and whatever else you might want with you. And so it's okay to refer to those things in answering the questions if you need to. But if you've been reading all along, I think that probably many of the questions you're going to know the answers to. Most of these questions come from a test bank that the author Phyllis Day's publisher has presented to us. There are some questions from the Karen Seccombe book and a few from our lectures also. So you have an hour to complete the test once you open it, and when you do open it, you have to complete it before you close it. So, or you let me just say that if you don't complete it, the score of the answers that you did make will be the one that counts. So that if you answer 10 questions and decide, I can't deal with this, that will be your first attempt when you close it. And so plan to finish the 40 questions when you open it. And again, if you're unhappy with the results, you can retake the test one time. So and the higher of your two efforts is the score that will be, the higher score will be recorded. So that test will open on Thursday, March 1st, and will close on Sunday, March 11th. So you have about 10 or 11 days there to take the test. Once the test has closed on the 11th of March, it won't reopen. It will no longer be available to you. So it's very important for you to keep that in mind. Be sure to mark your calendar. I think if I haven't sent out a notice about this, I will be. It's also on your course calendar as well. And I think it's in the weekly course content. Hope you have a good week, and we'll talk to you later.